Quote, "You heard it here first. Gen Z will be the best thing to ever happen to the restaurant industry." End quote. What's up, y'all? Will here at Schedulefly and the Restaurant Owners Uncorked podcast, brought to you by us here at Schedulefly. Super simple restaurant employee scheduling software backed by legendary customer service. If you're on pencil and paper or Excel, or you're using one of these complicated, expensive softwares that have tons of bells and whistles and information and data and noise that you don't need or use, we'd love to serve you. We'll make life easier. Schedulefly.com. Also brought to you by our two sponsors, Popmenu and Kickfin. You'll hear more about those momentarily. And there's also links to them in the show notes. But let's get back to that quote. That comes from Jim Taylor. Jim owns Benchmark 60, and I was honored to have him on the podcast for this episode. He posts a lot of bold statements that he believes and stands by. He posts them on Instagram. He posts them on LinkedIn. As I told him during this interview, he's prolific. He's got a lot of great content. I'm going to read a couple more, and then we'll dive right into this episode. Turnover. Well, let's just go back. Quote, "Turnover is not the problem. Workload is the problem. Turnover is just a result of unsustainable workload." End quote. Quote, "Unpopular opinion. The restaurant industry glorifies the wrong things. That's why turnover is high and mental health is low." End quote. And then last, quote, "I feel a level of responsibility to leave the restaurant industry happier than I found it." End quote. Follow Benchmark 60 on Instagram, at Benchmark 60, one word, all together, 60 spelled out. Follow Jim Taylor on LinkedIn and check out Benchmark 60's website and check out this really thoughtful, intentional, meaningful conversation that Jim and I had about the industry and about what he's trying to do to help the industry that he loves so much and that has given him so much joy and fulfillment and challenges over his years in the business. Before we get to that conversation, though, let's hear a quick word from our awesome sponsor, Popmenu, lead sponsor for the podcast, and a great company. We share a lot of mutual customers, and, well, here we go. Popmenu is, well, they're a partner of Schedulefly, and we have a lot of happy mutual customers. But Popmenu is all about making your day easier and your sales bigger. They will simplify your marketing operations, bring in more guests, capture customer data for personalized remarketing to keep them coming back. With one super simple to use platform that integrates with most point of sales like Toast and Square and a number of others, Popmenu starts with a beautifully designed, easy to update interactive menu that transforms the guest experience online. It includes a brand new website that's optimized for search engines like Google for no additional cost, automated digital marketing, online ordering and waitlisting, and you'll never miss another call with their AI answering solution that costs as little as 47 cents an hour. Check it out. Check out the link in our show notes. There's so much more in Popmenu. Here's my 2 cents. I've talked to a lot of our mutual customers, and here's what they say about Popmenu. Great company, great customer service, great product, great results. Check out Popmenu and check out this episode of Restaurant Owners Uncorked. Thank y'all for listening. See ya. Perfect.
Yeah,
Well, let's just dive right in, man. Jim, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Yeah, my name is Jim Taylor. I'm the founder and CEO of Benchmark 60 Restaurant Services. So we're located up here in Western Canada in Vancouver, British Columbia. We work with restaurant groups all over Canada, the US, the UK. We're helping them try to understand things like how productivity affects the business model, what employee workload is doing to team well-being, mental health, and also the business model, how that stuff all connects so that they can hopefully, retain people better, run a better business.
All right, man. I got so much I want to ask you about. You post, y'all, if you're on LinkedIn, follow Jim. He posts the best stuff on LinkedIn about this industry. I want to get into
Thanks.
Oh man, for sure. And I want to get into wellness and mental health and some of the stuff you cover a lot. But let's just go back to your background real quick and just tell me how you got involved in the industry. I mean, you and I have talked, I know, but tell us, how you got in the industry and how that led you to where you are today.
Yeah, I got in the industry like I think a lot of people do. I was out of high school and needed a job, and I was playing basketball at college and I was allowed to work like 1 day a week, right? So guess what's the easiest job you can make good money at? Try to go be a waiter, right? So I started with a company, and I was with them for 20 years. I never left. So I just kind of continued to try to work my way up through the organization and learn new skills and hopefully, take good care of people and that kind of thing. And I was with them until 2020 when the pandemic hit, and sort of, as lots of us did, I think, tried to think about, is this what I'm going to do forever? Is this what's working for me? I was on an airplane like every 2 days because I was doing, big corporate operation across the country type stuff. And so when airplanes couldn't go, I sort of realized how nice it was to stay home. So I quit my corporate operations job with basically no plan. And I always tell people, it's funny because I used to say, kind of reluctantly, I used to be like, well, I kind of got into this, what I'm doing now, by accident. Now I believe that it was sort of, meant to happen, and it was kind of an organic process of trying to help the industry look at things differently moving forward.
Well, you've obviously seen a lot of change in the industry over the last 20 years. You have a long way to go. What about this industry? You clearly love the industry. Let me start with that. Like, 100%. It's very clear to me through reading what you write. It is very clear that it's authentic and that you care deeply about the industry and you care deeply about the people in this industry. Tell me what happened. You started working 1 day a week at this place. You're there for 20 years. Like what was the magic that really, resonated with you that's got you so to this day so passionate about this space?
Again, I think like a lot of people, there's so much in my life that has come from working in restaurants, right? Opportunity to travel. I've learned a ton of, so many cool skills and so many that you probably can't even think about. I met my wife working in restaurants, like all of these things. I was really lucky, I think, to have a really strong mentor that was very people driven. Right. And, a couple examples. One, I remember I was when I first got into management, I was very rule following, right? It was like, hey, we told you to carry a tray. Why aren't you carrying a tray? We told you to bust the table in 1 minute. Why isn't it cleaned yet? That kind of thing. And at one point I maybe was a bit too rigid. And the guy I was working for, he actually sat me down and he goes, listen, if people don't love working with you every day, they're not going to work with you every day. They'll just go work with someone else. He didn't position this as a threat, but he goes, or you just won't be the one running those shifts anymore. Because that's how important this is. I've never forgot that. Was, 25 years ago, he told me that or something like that. So, but yeah, I think the people side of the business, I believe that we kind of, when we're running restaurants, we put on an invisible cape every day and go in and try to be somebody's hero and help just people have a good day, right? That's what hospitality is all
about. Jim, you talk a lot about the people in this space and the burnout, the mental health issues, this substance abuse. This is what the industry has been known for so long. And it used to kind of be, show up, bust your ass, work however many hours we want you to work. If it's 6 days a week and, 70 hours, then do it. And it was a work hard, play hard mentality. Some of the things that came with that were that, sort of like a tight knit family environment. But what came with it also was like lots of negative consequences for a lot of people and a lot of unhealthy lifestyles. And, you started seeing people that were, well known and successful in the industry take their own lives or have complete burnout, breakdowns, drug and alcohol issues and so forth. So the industry has started to move in the direction where I actually interviewed somebody, I think it was like a day or two ago, and he was talking about how they are aggressively make sure that their managers are not working more than 50 hours a week, and because they make the managers clock in, and if they clock in for more, that's not a good thing. They want them to have that balance. And you are
Yeah. And, and so, but that's where a lot of your content comes in. It's like, we've got to take care of these people. This is a great career, a wonderful career with a very diverse set of people that come into this space that have all kinds of backgrounds. And it's an amazing group of people that have a lot of energy and a lot of passion and a lot of love. But it's also a group of people that has been really pushed hard for a long time, and it's led to all these things. So, I just think it's so refreshing what you're talking about, which is let's take really good care of these folks. Like, let's recognize these issues that have been a negative impact or had a negative impact on the industry for so long. And let's make this a place where people can come and have, not just make enough money to live, but have the right balance in their life and raise families and be successful and be parts of organizations that can grow if they have. I mean, look, if you're doing this right and you're managing your people right, and you're running you're focusing on the people, your business will be successful. Therefore, you're going to grow. Therefore, they're going to have opportunities to grow. And I mean, that's the gist of a lot of what you're saying. Is that, I mean, help me out here. Is that?
Yeah, for sure. And whatever that company is that you just mentioned, that they're actually monitoring things like how many hours their people are working. I mean, that's a really good first step and really good start. And more companies, I think, need to do that kind of thing. We sort of, to be fully honest, the workload thing that we talk about, and I'll kind of get into this in a bit here. It kind of happened. We sort of stumbled over it. So when my business first started a few years ago, we were helping restaurants understand things like, we were coming out of the pandemic. A lot of restaurants were looking for ways to, we've got to dig ourselves out of this financial hole, right? We've got to make some of this money. We got to pay back some of these loans, whatever this may be. And so we were helping them understand things like how metrics around productivity in the business impact their model, how incremental improvements will help to make the business more profitable, how to measure it, how to speak the language, a lot of that kind of stuff. And somewhere along the way, in sort of that first year, we kind of stumbled over the fact that we started to connect some interesting dots together. Things like the restaurants that we looked at, let's say it's a multi-unit concept, the ones within that group that had the highest levels of, air quotes, if people aren't watching this, productivity, also had things like the highest levels of turnover and the lowest levels of average customer spend. And some of these things that were telling us that they're crossing some sort of threshold. Mm-hmm. Something's happening that this level of how productive the business is, it's not good anymore. It's actually hurting. So, we started to do some homework and stuff, but the best analogy, I think I shared this with you when we were chatting a few days ago, is all these professional sport leagues, they use load management strategies to protect their people. Yeah, to protect their biggest assets from burnout and injury and mental fatigue. So that has become a big component of what I talk about and what we work on with companies is, what is that threshold? How do you identify it? What does it do to the business when your team is taking on too much workload and it's burning them out and it's causing mental health challenge and it's affecting customer experience and it's affecting profitability? But it's become a much more the conversation, especially in the last year.
So I want to ask you about this. I'm just fascinated with how you've used LinkedIn. I mean, you're prolific, but I would imagine that's a very deliberate strategy. Is that? Just tell me about that.
Yeah, prolific is, I don't think I've had anybody use that word. Yeah, well, it's about 1,000 pieces of content a year.
Okay.
Is kind of the cadence, I guess. But it's very intentional. And I tell people all the time, there's nothing that I do in my daily routine that creates more opportunity than generating content. Whether it's guys like you and I meeting, whether it's opportunity to find a new restaurant company to work with, whether it's a strategic partnership that comes up, whether it's just meeting cool people, it started out because my business started kind of organically and there wasn't this lead up to launch a business. There wasn't a marketing strategy or a budget to do that. And it was just like, I'm just going to start talking about some of this stuff. And after a couple of months sort of doing it every day, I realized like, wow, I've met some really cool people all over the world. And all of the business that's happening is coming from this. So it was kind of like double down on that and then triple down on that. And I can honestly say that almost every single opportunity, whether it's personal, business, relationship, whatever, in the last few years related to the business has come through LinkedIn as a platform. Yeah, it's tough to beat it.
So when somebody contacts you, what do they tell me how that goes? Like, what are people calling and saying, hey man, this is why I'm contacting you and this is what I need?
Yeah. Typically it's, you know what, to be totally honest, typically I'm not fully sure I understand how this relates to my business, but I'd like some more information.
Okay.
I mean, a prime example of a multiple Michelin star restaurant in Manhattan. I was on the phone with them this morning because they went, our business has operated very kitchen driven for decades, right? Very chef driven. It's an intense environment. Our customers spend $400 a head. You know, we're not worried about profitability necessarily. We're not worried about our labor cost. We don't have very high turnover really compared to the rest of the industry because it's a career for people, right? They make six figures. However, we notice that there's a burnout factor. We notice that there's a mental health thing, and we need to understand this more. So quite often that's the kind of conversation it is. It's you know, things like we're trying to protect our people better. We're trying to understand how the business model is changing. And we know that the people side has something to do with it. So really what we do is we help put metrics to that people side of things. We help them understand how it affects the model.
Okay. Okay. Dive into some of the metrics a little bit more.
Well, pretty much every, for one, and Schedulefly, and you guys probably have something like this, but almost every software product that's in our industry, right? There's a number of them out there that we don't need to mention. And almost every restaurant company looks at metrics like productivity in one way or another. Maybe they look at it as far as, you know, in its simplest version, maybe they look at it in terms of how many tables does a waiter or a waitress or a server get on Friday night. Yeah. Right. Maybe it's no more than 4 to protect service. Maybe it's, you know, maybe they take it one step further and they say, we don't want our staff to serve more than 20 guests at a time because it's about protecting service, right? Maybe they look at it like how many dollars per work hour are being generated in the restaurant, right? And a lot of restaurants that we talk to find that they manage labor cost on one line and they manage that dollar per hour output on a separate line, and they look at them as two separate things. And what we help a lot of those restaurants do is understand how to connect the two. We help them understand what that threshold is, where it's going from productivity to workload, a workload issue. We help them bridge the gap between maybe what the software is that they're using and how to actually connect that to the business model and people side of the business. So there's lots of ways to sort of look at it, but the metrics are typically things that they already have access to. Customer count per hour worked, dollars in food produced per hour worked, those types of things. You know, but there's lots of examples around, you know, we had a company we were working with not long ago that said, we're going to do the handheld thing. We're going to put iPads in every front of house employee's hands so that they can take more orders faster in a full service environment, right? They also thought we're going to be able to go from 5 table sections to 7 table sections because they don't have to run back and forth to the POS anymore. So they'll be able to take a bigger section. So we did a sample with them where we looked at, okay, let's forget what it's going to do to labor costs. Let's look at what it does to how productive the business is first. And it was actually kind of scary because they thought we'll just increase section size, labor costs will drop, we'll capital expense the iPads and we're good. But what it actually did was, in some ways, it complicated the service model. The staff weren't as confident with this, you know, trying to maintain eye contact while we're ringing things on an iPad. It was distracting them from talking about the food the same way. They still had these habits of run back and forth to the POS. So they're still taking these steps unnecessarily. So it actually, in the first test restaurant they did, overall productivity went up, but salesmanship changed, the business model changed, and labor cost actually also went up. So what I'm saying is we sort of helped them understand what the bigger impact was, how to get closer to where they wanted it to be, and then roll it out across the rest of the restaurants. Don't just pull the trigger across the whole thing. Another interesting one was this whole term, the whole labor shortage thing has been a big discussion, obviously.
Yeah.
So there was a case study that we did with 10 restaurants in the Midwest, in the US. Full service restaurants, busy places, 6, 7, 8 million a year in revenue per location. And they were finding across the board, front of house and back of house, not one location was able to hit their labor cost targets. Like week after week after week after week, they just weren't able to hit them. And the CFO was saying to me, he goes, well, we've raised prices multiple times in every location. So I don't understand why they've got more money to play with. The wages have gone up a little bit, but not dramatically. They've got more money to play with. Their wages are basically static, yet they're less profitable than they were in 2019, let's say. So we started to kind of peel back the layers on things like workload and productivity. And we found that it was all connected to the fact that the average employee in that company in 2019 worked there for about 2 years, which is pretty good for a restaurant, right?
Yeah.
When we were looking at this last year, the average employee in that company had less than 5 months of experience in their company. So they just couldn't handle as much workload as their counterpart could have 3 years ago. So the management, what they were doing unknowingly was protect the employee experience, protect the service model, protect the guest experience, but it was hurting the profit model. And they couldn't really put it, they didn't really understand why. But so we were able to help them sort of go, okay, well, here's the level now. If we can incrementally improve this over the next 90, 120 days, whatever that might be, we can get back to that level. And then you've got more money to play with. You'll probably be more profitable than you were pre-pandemic. But it was this sort of push on lower labor costs that was actually causing burnout, causing retention challenge, causing customer service issues if they weren't careful.
A lot of people left the industry for good in COVID. Some have come back. And a lot of it depends on, I guess, where you're located. But, for a long time, all anybody wanted to talk about when I would speak to them on this podcast, when I would talk to customers, was like, I can't get anybody to work. Now, front of house, they're starting to, back of the house is still a big challenge. What are you seeing people do about that?
I think there's some cool stuff happening. It's forcing companies to look at things differently. I'm sure in those discussions, you had lots of conversation about this new generation doesn't want to work. Maybe they're lazy, or they, Gen Z or whatever.
We've had a whole comment on that. I want to hear what you have to say.
Yeah, honestly, I think that generation is going to be one of the best things that ever happened to our industry.
There we go. Yeah,
they're going to force us to look at things differently.
Yep.
They're going to force our industry to look at how they operate differently, to look at how we protect employee experience differently, to how we train people, all of those things. There's a company that we were doing some work with a couple of years ago. It's one of the coolest examples. So they employ a lot of young people. They're multi-unit, and it's one of those scenarios where head office is basically attached to one of the locations, right? So the people at head office know all the staff in that restaurant. So one of the executives is walking in to get a coffee in the restaurant in the morning on his way to head office, and sees this employee that's there in the morning, and they're just in shambles. They're like, their shirt's all wrinkly and got stains on it. It looks like they just rolled out of bed, and it's, they're the opening bartender there in the morning. And so the executive just goes over and they're like, is everything okay? And like, are you all right? How's your morning going, kind of thing? And the kid just goes, look, he goes, we're short-staffed. I'm exhausted. I'm working 6 days a week. I closed last night. I opened this morning, but I'm here. What do you want, kind of thing, right? And he goes, I only have one work shirt, so I'm sorry that this looks like I slept in it. So the executive goes, into their meetings for the day and whatever they're doing, and came out of that day going, we need to do something different for our people. So, and this is one of the most extreme examples I've heard. They started to provide at-home cleaning and laundry service for every employee that works in that company. They send somebody to their house, like a couple of hundred staff. They send somebody to their home once a week for 2 hours to clean and do their laundry. as a means to improve their at-home life and hopefully their at-work life. Because if somebody's there to do your laundry, clean your work shirt, hopefully when you show up to work, it'll be clean. But some really cool stuff like that we're starting to see happening. And a lot of the groups that we've worked with that have sort of really, latched on and start to believe in this workload concept, they're starting to put things in their manuals and in their employee promises around things like, and this is kind of like what you said around the management, that they have process and policy in place to help protect the workload of their employees from crossing into an unhealthy, unsustainable level.
I love that story. That is an extreme example. That's amazing. But the commitment that shows to the employees, I mean, that resonates. I mean, people need to make enough money, but money's just not the solution for this stuff. People want to feel validated. They want to feel like you actually care about you, not that, like if you have your corporate values or your core about whatever it is that they're not just words, they're lived out. And I just feel like, I mean, in hospitality and in any business, but gosh, in hospitality with the amount of turnover this industry has typically had and all the issues that could be solved by reducing turnover and keeping people employed, the amount of money that saves and the flow that creates for the business and all of the, both measurable and immeasurable things that come with that, it's all based on you just investing in people. I mean, if you invest in people and make them want to let them know that you care and show them through your not just words but actions, like attracts like. They stick around, they attract other good people, and all these people are just going to take phenomenal care of your guests, which is what this is ultimately all about. But it's and it's good to see that there are a lot. I mean, there are restaurants and restaurant groups now that, whether it's healthcare or 401k or gym memberships or, helping them pay for therapy or whatever it is, like this is, I mean, you're on the leading edge of this, man. And it's a good thing to see folks like you with the energy and focus you have pushing this forward, because I do agree with you that, I mean, I have kids in that generation. And it's easy to look at it like, they're fickle and they don't want to work. But look, it's like any problem. You can say, well, this is just a problem and, it's just how it is. Or you can say, okay, this is the situation. How do we turn this? Like, how do we get better from it and turn this into and you can with creativity and the right focus. I spoke to a group. They were on the podcast, so I'll say it, Table 301 down in Greenville, South Carolina. Great group, been around a long time. They have a required 1 month paid sabbatical for every manager every 5 years. Like literally, if you've been there 5 years, you have to take a month off. You have to not respond to your emails, not come into the restaurants, go do something you want to do, and it's paid. It's on the house. Like imagine what that does for their management team turnover and their management team commitment. And what a great investment. I'm sure you can measure the cost of that, but like, how do you measure, what that does for those folks and how much that makes them want to be a part of that group and how many people would want to work in an environment like that? Like, wouldn't you want to sign up for something like that if you're managing restaurants?
100%. That's an incredible example. I mean, good for them. That's unreal.
All right, y'all. Time for a little mid-episode break to talk about Kickfin, our mid-episode sponsor and a great business. Thousands of restaurants, bars, and breweries use Kickfin to tip out their employees instantly, no cash required. With Kickfin, tips go directly to your employer's bank of choice the second their shift ends. It's a really simple solution to a really big problem, because if you're still paying out credit card tips in cash, it's costing you. Time-consuming bank runs and cash counting take managers away from work that matters. Cash is hard to track, which leads to accounting headaches, and it creates the perfect opportunity for theft, human error, and compliance issues. Bottom line, there's never been an instant, secure way to pay out tips until Kickfin. It's an easy-to-use software that sends real-time cashless tip payouts straight to your employees' bank accounts 24/7, 365. Kickfin gives managers hours back in their day, makes reporting a breeze, and protects your business from risk. Most importantly, employees love it. Restaurants can have Kickfin up and running overnight. Employees can enroll in seconds. No hardware, no contracts, no setup fees. Visit kickfin.com for a personalized demo and see how restaurants across the country are digitizing tips with Kickfin. That's what they like me to read. I will tell you this. I know the folks at Kickfin. Check out the episode with Brian Hassan, the co-CEO of Kickfin, was on here on the podcast. Great people, love what they do. They treat their customers well. We have mutual customers that love the product and love the way they, the relationship they have with Kickfin. So check it out, link in the show notes, and let's check out the rest of this episode.
There's another good example with management that we saw recently, that trying to figure out how to do this hybrid work model thing in the restaurant industry, right? So many people are talking about, okay, well, if I go get this job, I can work from home, or I can 50% of the time I can work from home, or I can, whatever it might be. But restaurants, that's tough to do, right? So that a really good example that we've seen recently is a flex model where the manager, so let's say, okay, your typical restaurant, you're working 5 days a week, maybe 10 hours a day, or whatever that might be. In this environment, they said, okay, everybody is going to work 4 days and what they call flex day. So, because when you're in a management position in a restaurant, as everybody knows, you've got on the floor time, or in the chef in the kitchen time, and you've got admin time, right? And so, I just remember so many times personally, I'm trying to write a schedule and I'm sitting down at a booth at 10 o'clock at night, trying to write the schedule or do an order or, take inventory, that whenever I can fit it in, right? So what they've been doing is you're mandatory 4 10-hour days. And on your Friday, whatever day that lands on, it's a flex day. This is what they call it. And what that means is that you're required to be in the restaurant from 11 until 2, just to help cover off lunch service. And then the only rule that exists from 2 o'clock for the rest of the day is you have to leave the restaurant.
Perfect.
If you want to leave and go to a coffee shop and do some admin work, awesome. If you want to go and have a beer with your friends on a patio, awesome. If you want to hit the road and have a long weekend, fill your boots, right? Just whatever it is that you want to try and do with that time. And they don't manage that time at all. Do whatever you want with it. The interesting byproduct of that is their top performing people were like, okay, I'm going to get really deliberate about this. And I'm going to use 2 out of my 4 days a month to be really productive. And then 2 weeks, I work 4.5 days a week, right? They're less productive or less top performing people said, I work 4.5 days a week. And they don't use any of that time to get things done. So it actually became almost like a performance management strategy for them as well. But the feedback was 100% consistent across the board. Every single manager, they didn't lose one manager while they were piloting it for 6 months. And every single manager that they asked said they felt like they had more flexibility, they had more time. They didn't feel like they worked as much. Like there was really positive feedback across the board, and it didn't cost more.
I love that example. That's fantastic. What is the what is the pushback that you get? Like, what are the things that prevent people from moving in this direction?
I think it's a combination of the restaurant's we've always done it this way. The industry's very sort of stuck in this, we've always done it this way sort of mindset.
Yeah.
And I think there's concern about cost, right? Things are getting more expensive. So trying new things can be costly. So again, that's where a lot of what my business does and a lot of the work we do is to help model what this could look like. How will this impact the model if you want to try this idea? Right? If you want to do something that's going to try to retain your people, and you used the term a few minutes ago, measurable or immeasurable, right? There's always that piece, but so much of it is measurable. If you do these things and improve employee retention by 10%, well, we can put a dollar value to that.
Yeah.
But I think it's a combination of the two of those. It's cost, and maybe our industry's a bit stubborn.
Yeah, I mean, employee retention, very measurable. Turnover, very measurable. So yeah, exactly. Yeah, you're right. So do you do you work with, I mean, you mentioned a single location in New York. Of course, that's a high volume, high revenue place. I mean, do you work with restaurants? You mentioned US, Canada, wherever. Do you work with single location up to a certain size, or does it matter?
It doesn't matter. It's interesting. When the business first started a few years ago, there was kind of this process go through, okay, what's our customer avatar, or whatever the catchy way to say it is, right? And, originally it was kind of like, okay, we're going to work mostly with, regional mid-market restaurants, independent, multi-unit, but not, privately owned, but so not like these enterprise size restaurant companies. But what we've really learned over the last few years is it's the work that we do and how we sort of engage with restaurant companies it's more about attitude than anything else.
Yeah.
It's more about, I want to try to do things differently, but I'm not exactly sure how. I want to, try this idea that I think will help my people, but not sure how to measure it. There's a gap between the data and what to do with it. And so, I don't understand what this is telling me in some way, shape, or form. So the smallest restaurant group, for example, in the last year that we worked with, the smallest restaurant was a $300,000 a year cafe in a little college locally that just serves coffee and breakfast basically, but wanted to find better ways to take care of their people and battle all the rising costs. And our biggest client that we currently work with, I think, has about 100 locations across Canada. But yeah, Canada, the US, and a few in the UK. So a little bit of everything.
Like, take the coffee shop. Do you work with them for, is it a defined period of time? Is it an ongoing relationship, or is it a specific laid out contract, or how does that work?
Yeah, typically we would start with doing about 6 months worth of work together, because in a lot of cases, if it's about trying new things, there's some education involved, right? And if we just said, hey, let's do this for 60 days, well, by the time we're done, everybody forgets everything and it doesn't stick, right? So it's usually, most of the engagements that we have are anywhere from 6 to 12 months. Sometimes they go longer than that, depending on what's coming up and what they're working on. But yeah, so anywhere between, the shortest would be 90 days and all the way up to close to 2 years.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
I want to talk a little bit about restaurant culture, because culture's, for me, it's become, so I feel like I think I'm going to get ready to start a culture series on this podcast. Having a very clearly defined culture seems to be so important. You would know much better than I. But I think about it even just as like where I'd like to work, or where I'd like my kids to work. And the same person, I'll go ahead and say it's Humankind Hospitality down in Oklahoma City. I just haven't posted his episode yet. They're the ones that say no more than 50 hours, and they monitor. They also have 7 core tenets of their culture. And every week they take one of those tenets and pre-lunch service, pre-dinner service, like one of them would be maybe it's humility, and I don't even think that was one of them, but he listed the 7. But it's like it's a very clear word, and it's a very important part of their culture. And they will talk about that pre-service, lunch, dinner, 7 days a week. The next week they go to the second word, and they just rotate through every 7 weeks, and they talk about what that word means, how they can focus on that word this week, and so on. And I just thought that was such a great example of not just, we sit down and we come up with our core tenets and our culture and the foundation, this bit, whatever it is. And then, we put that somewhere, or it's part of our training or whatever, but like reinforcing that so frequently, you've got to know that culture is so thoroughly instilled in that staff there. They can all, I mean, if you've been there more than, 7 weeks, probably, like somebody says, tell me about your culture. Well, boom, 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 boom. But then you ask, and sorry for this long-winded conversation here, but a lot of people, Jim, owners, managers, I say, tell me about your culture. And it's a more of a nebulous, like we care about our people thing. I feel like having a really clearly defined culture that is known and loved and embraced and taught and reinforced, to me, that's got to be a big part of investing in your people and keeping people excited about what you're doing and keeping them on your team. Am I barking in the area around that stuff?
Yeah, I think so for sure. And, this employee protection type approach is, I think, a big part of where we're seeing some companies have some success, right? Is like you said, with the company around, they measure management hours. If you work more than 50, this is not a good thing. This doesn't fit with how we want to operate, right? I think, that concept around workload protection and not, crossing into unhealthy thresholds is part of that. A couple of really good examples that I've seen in the last year. One company that we spent some time with, they had actually a culture team within their staff where you could apply to be a part of the culture team. And if you were part of that team, you basically wore a pin on your uniform so that all the staff, that if anyone was new, they were trained. If you need some help or whatever, you go to one of these people, they can help you with whatever, how to do your cash out or how to sign in for a shift or change a schedule or whatever, all of that kind of stuff. But they also were kind of, the ones that were expected to set the example. They lived and breathed those core values. And they got rewarded for it. They got to pick their own schedule. They got, priority vacation time, all that stuff. Another good one that we saw was a company that had an internal process for employees rewarding employees. So they had, they actually were using poker chips, just little company branded poker chips. And so let's say you and I are working a shift together and you just happen to be in my section a bunch and you're helping me throughout the shift without anyone asking you to. Or I see someone, you walk by me and you pick up some garbage off the floor. I could go to the manager and say, hey, I'd like to give Will a poker chip for helping me tonight. So I go to you and I say, here you go. Thanks very much for your help. At the end of the shift or the week or the month, if you had 3 poker chips from people, you could buy yourself a beer after work. If you had 5, you could buy yourself a meal. So they actually turned it into currency to use in the restaurant. But it was this really powerful thing about staff rewarding each other for good behavior, right? For things that they wanted to see more of. I think that one was really, really, really powerful. There's lots of those things I think that companies can try and do, because to me, the biggest missing component of culture in restaurants quite often is, like you said, there's core values, but it's about whether or not the people working there actually live them every day. Yeah. So yeah, I think I would encourage restaurants just to try things, do something that might be fun or outside the box to try to make sure it's talked about more often.
I know we have just about a few minutes left. So what have I not asked you? What have we not talked about that we should, if anything?
Well, I think just the fact that, you said this earlier about how much you feel like, I love the industry. I just truly believe that the restaurant industry has a very bright future, and this is a big speed bump, but I just encourage operators to just try to do something different, try to think outside the box. The Gen Z thing, the reason I believe that they're maybe the best thing that will ever happen to restaurants is because they're not lazy or stubborn. They've just got options.
Optionality. You're exactly right.
Right. Whereas when I was starting in restaurants, I was just lucky to have a restaurant job and I was replaceable. Right. And now that's not the case. So I think, for any operator that we talk to, I always ask them just like, what are you guys doing? What are you working on that's new and fun and exciting and different? Because we got to look at it differently now.
Just real quickly, I always like to ask this when I think about it. Do you read a lot? Do you listen to podcasts? Like where do you consume content? You create it. Where do you consume it?
I do actually. I've listened to a few of yours. There's a few podcasts that I listen to quite a bit, and I used to read lots. Now I'm more of an audiobook person.
But business books or fiction or both?
Mostly, business and leadership, a little bit of marketing, but a couple of good ones that I've listened to recently. Ego is the Enemy is an amazing book if you've never read it.
Ryan Holiday, yes.
That one is awesome. Building a Story Brand. You're a business owner. Building a Story Brand by Donald Miller is, lights out. It's one of the best. What else have I read lately? The Starbucks Experience was a good one.
Building a Story Brand, I need to check out. Ego is the Enemy. If you've read that, he also wrote The Obstacle is the Way. He's written a lot of books, but Have you read Obstacle is the Way?
No, I'll add it to the list.
Highly recommended. Highly recommended. Yeah. Okay, good, man. Yeah. Well, I'm just curious. And that there, I got a good book recommendation.
Yeah,
how
me
to
too.
who is the story? Who wrote that?
Donald Miller.
Oh, wait, Donald. Oh, a million miles in 1,000 years. I've read his, do you know about that book?
I haven't read that one. No, his Building a Story Brand is, I mean, I recommend it to everybody who's in any kind of business, but especially if they're an entrepreneur.
John, I'm going to read it. His book, A Million Miles in 1,000. Shoot, it might be right back here in my bookshelf. It's I bet I dog-eared like a third of the pages of that thing. I think it's by my bedside table. Read
Yeah,
that.
it's really
That's
good.
his original book, but anyway, it's fun. That's what he talks about. He's like, make your life like you are the lead character in your story.
Mhm.
Your life interesting. That you are writing your own story, and you have any path you
Yeah.
want to take. It's up to you. And oh my gosh, that was such a great book. So I did not know he had written this. Okay, I'm in.
Yeah.
Dude, I'm
Yeah, awesome.
100%. Oh,
Sounds
Jim,
good.
thank you so much, man. We've talked on the phone. Good to see you. Keep
too.
that freaking awesome content coming, man. It is inspiring. Tell people, other than finding you on LinkedIn, where do we find you? Your website or wherever else? How should they?
Yeah, website. We've got a Benchmark 60 is the brand name, obviously. So we've got a website based around that. I mean, we're on Instagram and that kind of thing, but LinkedIn's the best, probably.
All right. Good deal,
Yeah.
man. Appreciate you, brother. Good
Thanks so
talking.
much.
Absolutely, man. All right. We'll talk again soon. See you.
Take care.
Hey, y'all, before you sign out on this episode, a couple of quick things. Number one, if you listen to us on iTunes, if you could give us a star rating and a comment, it would help so much. Same thing if you're on Spotify, follow us, or any platform that you're on, if you would just do whatever their rating or follow options are. What that does is it tells the algorithms that this content is good and meaningful and valuable, and it'll tell them to put it in front of more people. So thank you for doing that. If you take the second to do that, that'd be so awesome. And also, if your restaurant is either using Excel or you're using some software that's expensive and has a lot of bells and whistles you don't need, or maybe doesn't have great customer service, we'd love to take care of you at Schedulefly. Simple, easy restaurant employee scheduling software, legendary customer service, 30-day free trial, schedulefly.com. My cell phone number's on the trial sign-up page. Thank you for listening. See ya.